allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We need a definitive decision in the pledge, whether there's a comment after nation or not.
It's not on the agenda.
There's a common mistake, everybody says one nation, like there's a comment there, and it's not. Very common.
Okay, roll call.
Richard Fridena, Green Park. Steve Pothier.
Herbert, Tellman.
Brad Nelson, Levoy, Hurley.
Chris Cole.
Bill Beard.
John Cote.
Brian Bickel. You're not a public, so. There is nobody here from the public. Chairman's report, I really don't have a lot to report on this morning outside of the agenda items. Nothing catastrophic going on. I will say I'm looking forward to Brad's demonstration of his new toy.
Okay.
At least the propaganda sheet that you sent out
It does make it look interesting.
kind of looked like it could
It's show and tell.
open up a whole lot of things that would frustrate the bejesus out of Mr. Beard.
It's show and tell day.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, moving along, proposed legislation. Yeah, those things, go here.
As you can see, we are rapidly filling a lot of sheets with proposed legislative changes at the legislature. For those that are new to the process or are not familiar with how this is formatted, after this meeting, moving forward, I will begin to highlight in bold any changes from one meeting to the next in terms of it has advanced through the legislative process. I didn't do it for this one because basically half the things that are on these pages you see before you are new, and I wasn't going to sit there and highlight all of those. I forget what the cutoff date is for new legislation, but it's coming up here.
22nd, I
Yeah,
believe.
relatively quickly. After that date, no new bills can be proposed, but moving forward, what I will do is I will highlight, at least in the status, what has made progress from a previous meeting of this group. Obviously, if it's been introduced, it hasn't received any action. That doesn't mean anything. A lot of stuff can be introduced and not do anything until literally the last minute of the legislative calendar, and then all of a sudden it gets pushed through very quickly. Just a little key on what some of that stuff on the status means. COW means committee of the whole. If it's in committee, and it can be assigned to more than one committee. The big thing is if it shows that something that is a House bill has been transmitted to the Senate or vice versa, those are the ones that are probably going to have the most opportunity for final action before the end of the legislative session and sent to the governor. Whether it gets signed or not, that's another issue. I don't really have anything that jumps out at me per se that we haven't already discussed. A lot of the usual things that are in there, making various elected officials nonpartisan, adding a lieutenant governor to the line of succession in the state of Arizona, things having to do with redistricting, automatic voter registration seems to be a hot button for some members of the legislature. Be happy to answer any questions if I know anything about those specific bills. I have not studied every single bill. I apologize. I don't have the time.
This is more rhetorical than anything, but how many times has the lieutenant governor come up and failed?
According to the paper this morning, at least twice.
It is a perennial issue for certain members of the legislature.
It surfaces most often when the governor and the standing secretary of state are different political parties.
Yeah.
And that has been true whether there's a Democrat majority in the legislature or a Republican majority in the legislature.
I know, it just seems to demonstrate the intelligence of the legislature.
Don't use those two in the same sentence, please.
That's why the air quotes.
If you happen to know the rationale between 2015 and 2199, one of them moves the primary to May, and one of them moves the primary to June.
The main one, was from Shope. He just wanted it as early in the year as possible. I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe the intent for the other one that Gowan introduced is to basically gradually move the primary date earlier in the year. So each legislative session, or each two-year cycle, propose an earlier date, because historically they have found trying to go from the August primary date back to June or into May or even earlier in the year, no one likes those ideas. But there's enough of a sense among the legislators, and I believe this is true on the Democrat side, at least to some extent, moving it earlier in the year so the whole process can give election officials a little breathing room, if nothing else. From a practical standpoint, where we have our primary with early balloting, from a practical standpoint, it does not make sense to me. I mean, forget partisan, it just does not make sense. And if you're involved in campaigns, it is a pain in the ass. It is a royal pain in the ass. I don't care if you're a candidate, I don't care what party you're from, it is a pain in the ass.
Well, not only that, but the primary being as late in the cycle as it is, kind of makes us irrelevant.
There is a large body of thought that would get behind that idea. It will be interesting this year. I do know that there are some things, Eugenia Rita on the Senate has pushed a few things forward. There was one, her bill, SB, what was it? 2050, what am I thinking? The one that got transmitted to the House, yeah, 1054 for early ballot. There is a companion bill on the House side, I believe Representative Carroll is pushing it. It takes the basic idea of early balloting, and instead of, you can't drop it off, you're forbidden from dropping it off at the polling location without voting a provisional ballot. Set up a system, and I'm not sure the mechanics of this yet, of either signing a separate poll roster with the early ballot to forego the whole signature process, which from a mechanic standpoint makes a hell of a lot of sense. You're able to then forego how many ever thousands or tens of thousands of ballots dropped off on primary day or election day, having to go to the recorder and then go to the elections department, since you've already got this box over here that's got the polling location ballot. From a practical matter, it kind of makes sense. The mechanics, I'm not quite sure yet how that works.
Is that the one where you have the opportunity to bring your early ballot in, be identified and verified, take your ballot out of the affidavit envelope and put it in the polling place box? Or is that a different bill?
That's the one I'm thinking of. To your specifics there, I don't fully understand the mechanics of how that will occur, and also maintain the ability for checking to make sure that that same person didn't vote an early ballot already and that's already been processed. There's some mechanic things that I haven't understood fully.
That doesn't concern me, because if they're bringing the early ballot in, and they can prove they are the owner of the early ballot, that eliminates that problem. My problem is logistically, how do you verify that they're
The
in the right?
auditing in a post-general election environment will be a little more cumbersome, because the poll workers are going to keep account of the ballots that they were given at the beginning of election day, as you begin to potentially have ballots coming in from outside of that original allotment, then that could produce a little bit of a problem.
It would make sense if they set up either a separate in the poll, separate poll roster, separate, so that you kept those separate, but I'm not sure how that mechanically really can be achieved. The whole problem is, and I think regardless of which side you are on this issue, the early balloting process is still a problem in terms of the logistics of election day, regardless of whether you like it or not. Logistically, it's a problem, and how do you solve that from a logistics standpoint is what the conversations I've had with members of the legislature, both in the House and the Senate, is a major concern, and I think it goes even, it crosses the aisle to some extent, because from an election integrity standpoint, yeah, we're supposed to be done within 10 days, but it doesn't really, if you've still got 100,000 ballots left to count a week out from an election, the average person's gonna go, what the hell are you people doing? Okay, I don't care what your political persuasion is.
Well, in just reading through most of these, not all of them, but most of them, at least the ones that have been assigned to the committee already.
Mhm.
A lot of the legislation is driven by Maricopa County.
Yeah.
Not by, just by the problems that occur in Maricopa County because of the volume
And
that they're dealing with.
And again, this is, for some of you, this is repetition coming from me, but it bears repeating. We have systems in place in this state that have been basically overcome by the technology and the volume for over 20 years. And the legislature on both sides of the aisle has refused to do a damn thing about it. It's going to, the problems we have seen in Maricopa County, forgive me, things we've seen in Pima County in previous election cycles, and other counties across this state, there will be a time, if none of this stuff is updated and none of this stuff is changed, there will be a problem with an election. It may be a local one, it may be a statewide one, and we are going to be headlines all across the nation for screwing up elections one more time. That does nothing for the integrity of the process, much less the faith of the average voter that their votes count.
And it does not make any difference if it's us or Maricopa that does it.
Exactly.
And at Ann's presentation, she made a very good case that the problem is more with provisionals than with Hurleys, and that what was proposed would actually lead to more provisionals.
I'm not suggesting there is a perfect solution to this. One of the things I personally have, and I tell this to every person I've ever talked to in the legislature, Secretary of State's office, governor's office, the same thing. We have a very nasty habit when it comes to election law changes of making the perfect be the enemy of the good. And the result of that process on both sides of the aisle has been we've kicked the can down the road to the point where it's going to cause a major problem in an election and we'll have nobody to blame but ourselves. The problems in Maricopa County, whether they're incompetence, logistics, whatever you want to put associated with what's happened in Maricopa County in the last two major election cycles. The reality is something has to be done to change that. It's going to take some legislative changes, it's going to take some procedure manual changes, but unless they're done, those problems are only going to persist and grow larger.
What I'm hearing is that it's broken now, but not broken enough. It
Pretty
hasn't
much.
broken enough for.
So,
Pretty much.
The only thing that kept Arizona out of the national news cycle last cycle was the circus in Florida. Okay? And if DeSantis succeeds in fixing it, which I think he will, then we're going to be top dog next time if we don't fix it. And when the heat gets enough, then maybe they'll decide to do something about it.
Well, you have the circus in Florida and the circus in North Carolina. And the circus in
That's
North
true.
Carolina, to the best of my knowledge, still hasn't been resolved.
Right.
No.
So, but if they fix one circus, they keep peeling the onion back.
Yeah.
We're there pretty soon.
But I think, and Barb, to your comment, the bill you're talking about, the one I know of, is Virginia Rita's 1046, which says you can't drop an early ballot off at the polling place or an early voting center. The other one that's out there, not a companion bill, but kind of a companion bill, gives an alternative
Related
solution.
bill.
Says you can bring it in, verify that you are who you say you are, open up the ballot envelope and put the ballot in a precinct box.
Right.
That logistically, I think, would be a nightmare for elections department.
And maybe longer lines.
Well, not any longer.
More-
I disagree with you.
It's also going to be,
Properly handled, like Brad's people handle the elections now, just separated. There's no reason, we already have a box which is essentially a target tub that people drop off their ballots on election day. And it goes in there, there's no accountability at the poll of it at all, they just bring it in. It's dropped in the big plastic bag that the precinct brings to the elections department, that the elections department then reviews, and they give the mailing ballots to the recorder, and they give the provisional and the conditional ballot slips to the recorder, and they keep the regular ballots from election day, and they keep the provisional envelopes and conditional envelopes, and they go over here. And there's no reason why you couldn't have a third
Well,
Except
the
for
reason you
verification.
can't do that is because the way the bill is written, this is where the ballots
Well, you
go.
can get all that straightened out, but we have to participate if we want to do that. And we've kind of taken a position around here, and if I heard it the last time, is that we're sort of supposed to sit around and talk about it and not do anything. And that'll lead me into my conversation with item 2 when we get into that, or whatever item it is in here today.
We're supposed to do
There's no
things
question
in
about it,
individuals.
there's no question about it. Barbara and I sat in David's domain and almost every day and watched him run things. I was there after elections. I urge all of you to get involved and go down there and see it. It's quite an elaborate process.
It is.
And I'm quite proud of the fact that these guys have figured out how to do it with relatively few issues. And it's a paper chase, the way they keep track of it. However, having said all that, there are some inherent problems with mail-in ballots that have to do with jam on the table, waffles on the table, coffee stains, folded up and dog-eared, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we've deviated significantly from.
Yes, we have.
Getting back.
But it's a nice deviation to have, to talk about.
Just to wrap up this, the other thing I'll mention, and folks already know it, but just for the record, the sponsor, typically, if it's a sponsor from the majority, it has a greater chance of making it through the legislative process than someone from the minority. That's not 100% uniform, but it typically is the case. So if there's something that is particularly intriguing, but you'll notice that the sponsor is from the Democrat side, the chances of it seeing the light of day beyond a committee hearing is probably not very good. So I'll leave it at that. The related issue is the bipartisan commission, and did you want to do that now, or?
I don't see any other place on the agenda we can do it.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
It's tied, that request is tied to a bill that essentially does the same thing.
Okay.
There is a bill on this list that somebody's introduced, and I don't remember the number, and I got caught with a mouthful of cookies.
Come on, Mr. Chairman.
But, I know Barbara reviewed the letter.
The changes were fine.
Okay. If there's no problem with the changes, then Michael, if you want to prepare that memo, I'll come down.
Do we need to make that as a motion?
I think we approved it last month, it's just
We did last time.
the specific language of the letter.
Does the board need to approve the letter per se?
Board of Supervisors,
No, this board.
I think we did that at last month's meeting, yeah.
Unless there's changes, it's already approved.
Well, I thought I just heard him say there's some changes.
They were de minimis.
Barbara, are the changes to your?
Different, yeah.
There's
More,
minor.
more major.
Yeah.
Okay.
Language more than anything else.
Good, and Bill, they were minor as far as you're concerned, okay?
So basically print it up, have you sign it.
Well, let's let the board say, let's just make a motion and say, yeah, we did reaffirm our vote from the last time, let it rip.
So moved.
Okay, second.
You notice I waited till he had a mouthful of cookie.
I'm going to exercise my parliamentary authority as chairman. If you want to chair the committee, you can chair the committee. If not, leave it to me.
Well,
You did.
I agreed last time that we can chair. It doesn't mean we can't have differences respectfully.
We have differences of opinion, but it's not in your purview to call for a motion.
Okay, that's fine. So go ahead and call it.
Is there a motion to send a letter from Commissioner Beer to the Board of Supervisors relating to an election integrity commission at
So
the state
moved.
level?
Is the letter from Commissioner Beard or from the?
It's from the commission.
It's from the commission, but it was proposed by Commissioner Beer.
Yeah, well, let's make it clear it's from the commission, not an individual.
I changed it in my language, you approved it.
A letter crafted by Commissioner Beer, amended by Commissioner Tellman from the commission to the Board of Supervisors.
You gotta make sure the minutes
So
are accurate now?
Is there a second?
I seconded it.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Michael, if you'll draft that, by my signature, I'll come down and get that done. The 2018 annual report. I presented it Last time, I've heard nothing from anybody as far as any suggested or recommended changes. If that stands, then if you'll prepare that as well.
I'll print off a copy and, does it need to be signed also?
It has, if I'm gonna be here and you've got the copy, I'll
Okay.
put some
It goes on the
restrictions.
website.
I will draft up the PDF.
But I think
will
it's
do it up as a PDF and basically, yeah, I'll send it to the clerk of the board.
But I think it should be on
And then it goes on the
departmental
website.
letterhead.
Is this open for discussion? Is this item 3? Can we? Six, really.
Item 6.
Are we open for discussion? Mr. Chairman?
We offered discussion, nobody said anything.
Well, I was gonna say something, if I could, short, sweet. Some of us weren't on the commission the whole year, so some of us have no knowledge of what that really should be in that report and shouldn't be in that report. And I think that just amongst us girls here, we need to recognize that. So there's no way we could have corrected something we weren't aware of.
You correct or make comments on what you know about. We're not asking that you,
I understand that, but I just want to reaffirm. And for people, it's pretty common, I think.
We've never had a commission as long as I've been on it, it's been here for a whole year. In its entirety.
Okay.
That's true. There's always somebody on and off.
I'm on the middle of my 3rd year, I think it is.
Yeah.
The third trimester.
I'm not going in for an abortion, anyway.
Okay, anything else on the annual report?
Thank you for doing it.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a lot of cut and paste.
And thank you for me as well.
No problem. Calling into meetings. Steve, this is your agenda item.
Yeah, so I heard Michael talk about the pain of the phone, and that made me think about questions about the calling in for meetings. So one element would be great to not have the phone when we can avoid it. Another element is I kind of wondered about our rules say something about how many times we have to attend a meeting in a year. And the question is, does calling in count as attending, and should it? Given that we're basically a local thing, so being local seems important. And I guess the third element of that is, of course, it is harder to pick up on body language and interruptions and whatnot when you have a phone that there's a person on the other end of. So I'm looking for, is there a better way? Is there some clarification on our use of the phone for calling in, for commissioners calling in?
Bill?
Several things. One, I think we may run into some issues with the county attorney's interpretation of things if we're not careful. But setting that one aside, I know historically the ability of any commission member, not just this commission, but other commissions, have the ability to call in as being recognized as being attending the meeting is, especially for emergency meetings. The logistics of getting, and we've had 1 or 2 occasions over the years to have an emergency meeting, and without the phone ability, you would not have a quorum and couldn't act. I think those are the 2 main reasons why the phone calling is in there. I personally, I think it would be helpful if we pursued Skype or something as an alternative for members. At least they'll be able to see some of the presentations and whatnot. That might be helpful, but I don't know the mechanics and the logistics of attempting that. Might run into commission rules through the county attorney or something, but just throwing that out there.
Chris?
Okay, neither Arnie nor Jeff are here, and it was the 3 of us that wrote the bylaws. And if I remember correctly, granted my memory is not perfect, but if I remember correctly, there is something explicitly in the bylaws saying calling in is attending.
I didn't see that when I signed up.
I don't claim to have a perfect memory. I do remember that Arnie, Jeff, and I discussed it.
Okay.
For,
John?
if I may, I'm both a victim and a proponent of that call-in process. As you know, I called in either 2 or 3 times, I'm not sure which, last year. Once because I had a planned trip, and second time because my planned trip was extended by virtue of having been in an accident, a 5-car accident, and not being able to be here. It's extremely difficult to call in and understand the conduct of the board's conversation, the things that you said. But when I took this assignment, so to speak, I said to the man who nominated me that I had problems being out of town, and I was explained to me by Michael, I believe, maybe Brad, I don't know, that you could call in. That was a way of avoiding the problem of 2 people being gone and or 2 absences from the commission, which I think is what I was told was in the bylaws. And then you're out. At 4, you think it's 4? Whatever. I didn't want to have that problem, and I didn't want to participate. I will acknowledge to you that it is more than difficult to be on the phone in one of these meetings. You don't know who's talking. So many of us, frankly, sound differently on the phone, and you know, if you're new to the commission, you don't know the voices. I could pick out Barbara's voice on almost every occasion, and sometimes Brad's, but the rest, I didn't know who was speaking and who wasn't. We don't have a formal discussion board here. We don't run by Robert's rules, so we do have this informal discussion format, and I applaud that. I think it's a mistake to change that rule and omit being able to call in, because we want to encourage everyone to participate as much as they can.
So,
But there could be a better way, I suppose, of doing it, and that's not for my purview to suggest.
so I'd ask the question then, you know, if someone attended only via phoning in, would there be a problem with that?
I could see it would be a problem if more than one person tried phoning in at the same time.
You mean if somebody always phoned in and never came in?
Yes, that's right.
I don't know if that's ever come up as an issue. I think looking at it logistically and having phoned in last month, because I had a grandson that had a birthday and my grandpa there, so. But the biggest consideration I would ask is that if you're phoning in, learn how to mute your phone. Because that, from having sat on this end, listening to paper shuffle and everything in the background on the telephone, because whoever's calling in hasn't muted their phone when they aren't talking, is the problematic aspect of it as far as I'm concerned. Now, the flip side of that is when you guys are having a vote and want to know, then you got to give me time to power the phone back up, put in my password, unmute the phone and say aye. But I think that's.
So that's the cookie thing all over again?
Well, it's the cookie thing manifesting itself a little bit differently, but, you know, I would suggest that our enabling authority, which is the Board of Supervisors, permits calling in without restriction. And they've all done it on occasion. Everyone has called in at least once during my time going to Board of Supervisors meetings, so I think it would be a little bit presumptuous on our part to say, well, we want to be a little bit tighter than that, but I also think, you know, there needs to be a reasonable reason, and I think when you get to the point where somebody calls in all the time, it's like, why are you never in attendance at a meeting? And then I think there is a provision in bylaws that a commissioner can be removed from the commission or make a recommendation to the sponsoring entity that the commissioner be removed from the commission and I think we've had this discussion in the past, the problem with us removing somebody from the commission is there's nothing that prevents the appointing authority from turning around and reappointing them to the commission again. So we have no control over that.
True.
Mhm.
That can be a bit of a moot point.
And if I may, I don't know if on my phone call, but you can hear paper shuffling in the back. Perhaps so.
It's more than one person, that's all.
Well, but I will say to you that if you are away, as likely as not, you're gonna be using some little device like this that has its own peculiarities and thoughts about how things ought to work, and has its own mindset sometimes as to whether or not it wants to drop the call. I know that happened to me in one of my phone-in calls. It just dropped. And so it's hard. It may be that we have to put up with the paper shuffling. That's a problem with the technology, unless, I don't know, maybe Brad, maybe you know if there's another commission that has video conferencing.
There are departments that likely have it. I know that there are departments that have conference rooms with wonderful monitors and the availability to WebEx and Skype and all that various things. We are not one of those departments. But we could potentially look for such an environment going forward that we might be able to have meetings in. We tried, as some of the commission members may recall, we tried Skype with Dr. Stark out of Berkeley, and that was pretty problematic as well.
Yeah.
We ended up with only audio at the end.
Yeah, we had to use, I think it was my phone and somebody else's phone. It was strange, because somebody else was calling in addition to him, so it was very strange.
Yeah, it was an electronic market by the time we got it done.
Yeah, you don't just come in and try to set those things up on one meeting. You've got to, there's a whole process of proving it out before you ever do those things. I've done too many of them to ever walk into a meeting and say, oh yeah, let's just do a video conference. No, doesn't happen that way.
The other issue is cost.
There you go.
We don't have a budget, so
And
I'm pretty sure the elections department is not willing to fork over several thousands of dollars to get things set up, so that's.
But as far as calling in is concerned, I would say, make an effort to be here. If you can't, I would rather have your participation by phone than not have your participation at all. I think that's, there's something to be said for somebody that's willing to make the time and effort to call into a meeting when they're unable to attend, assuming they're on vacation, visiting friends, doing something that has greater social significance than sitting here. Obviously, when you've got somebody like Jeff Rogers who finds himself in a courtroom on a lot of Friday mornings, that's something that he can't do. But for people that are unable to attend, calling in, I think, is a viable alternative. And when we get to the point where that's the only way somebody ever attends, I think we can deal with that when it happens.
So if I may, I'm just looking over bylaws actually. There's nothing in here about telephone conference or anything like that.
Okay.
If it was in there, it's gone.
There's nothing that says we can and nothing that says we can't.
They just slapped on the subject.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to.
I remembered we talked about it. I thought we put it in.
So it's up to, obviously, the commission to decide how to deal with it, whether it meets quorums, all that kind of stuff. That's how I read it. Personally, I'm not a favorite of telephones. I pretty much told my sponsor, when I took this assignment, I go to Florida in November, I'm not gonna call it. From the beach, I'm sorry, I'm just not gonna do that, They say, okay, fine. So I made that clear to everybody.
Are you going just for a short time, or you leave?
We go for a month.
That's what-
Yeah, we go for the month of November. Well, sometimes we go to the spring, but we're not going to this year. So,
Okay, any other discussion on calling meetings?
I'm wondering if we need to make a motion to have some kind of we talked about people being absent and whether or not this counts. Do we need to follow up on that? And have a policy that we're going to adopt, or should we just let it drop and
we already have been operating by a certain procedure for obviously a period of time.
I'm starting my 6th year on the commission. I think, Barb, you've been on here longer than I have, and I think that's it. Jeez.
I think so.
We're the senior members. I think there's only been one time in my experience where we really had an issue with attendance with a member, and it was dealt with. It took a while, but it was dealt with.
And then we asked the sponsor.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not.
get us somebody that actually shows up. It's basically what happened.
It sounds like this is a non-issue in the sense that the things I were bringing up can be handled other ways anyhow. In particular, you say, well, hey, you're not attending, whatever, however, so.
No, I don't think we need to formalize it. We have a procedure that we do. It's not necessarily a policy, but it's something that we allow people to do.
It works.
And the only thing I would say is, because it requires some effort on Michael's part, if you're gonna be absent and you intend to call in,
Let me know in
he
advance.
needs to know in advance so that he can have.
Don't try and call him Friday morning.
Yeah, that's about the only thing, because I have to request the phone in advance, it's at least a week in advance.
Okay, so it's a week in advance then.
Yeah,
Okay,
that works.
Okay, anything else? All right. Secretary of State invitation, if my memory serves me right, Barbara wanted to make it a little bit more general. I got pretty specific in the draft letter that I submitted. I can certainly generalize it a little bit and still get my points across. I have had a conversation with the secretary. She knows the invitation's coming. She's looking for it and is looking forward to the opportunity to come down and meet with this group. So I did get the impression in my conversation with her that her focus right now is fixing the elections procedure manual.
Good.
She has hired a new elections director that's been on board for probably 2 weeks now, maybe a little bit more. Came from Snell and,
No, we're just
No.
going.
Or it's going.
okay. A law firm,
Yeah, well, never heard that before.
with multiple names. And again, Michael, I'll make any changes over the weekend and shoot that to you on Monday, and if you'll put that in the file, I'll come down and autograph that as well.
I forgot, did that letter include the elections director and any staff, or just her?
Well, it invited her and any members of the staff that she thought appropriate to bring along. I can certainly beef that request up. And one of the things that I did do because of her schedule and lack of fluidity is tell her that normally we meet on the 3rd Friday of the month, but we can certainly accommodate her schedule if we have to change the meeting date, which is something that we need to know about ahead of time as well.
I would echo Barbara's comment about the elections director. If she wants to come down with her and 3 aides, fine, but the elections director is the important one.
And we'll make that a focus.
Just a point of clarification, do we get copies, electronic copies of these letters that are being sent out by the commission? Because as we're going through this, some of my memory, because I've only been at one meeting, I understand what we're talking about. I'm joining an ongoing process. And so, do we get copies?
A copy was sent out last month, I didn't reprint it for this month. I don't reprint the documents, I just assume that you've already seen them at that point. They were provided last month.
Okay,
I'm
well,
hoping you held on to
yeah.
them, but.
I wasn't on last
You were
month.
not, yeah,
That's
it's the short answer to your question is yes, everything that gets mentioned here goes out electronically. The only caveat to that is you don't send it electronically, we send it to Michael, and Michael distributes it electronically. That's
Only because the issue has been raised in previous sessions for the new members, directly to your point about the letter. Anytime there's a discussion about something that may have been distributed previously prior to you coming on, or you missed a meeting, whatever, anytime just ask him for a copy, and it may take him a day or two to find it,
Okay,
they'll
we'll
send
get
it
you
to
one,
you.
if you need
Okay.
one.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, two things you don't do is distribute anything and reply all.
Which apparently my phone does automatically.
You're the electronics technician fixing it. Change the name of the commission, Mr. Cote.
Well, sirs, I have this item on the agenda because I'm concerned about the word perception. In this day of age, it's not so often what we do, it's the perception of what we do. We hear about news, fake news, this, that, and the other. Misleading thoughts, people are misleading this, people are misleading that. And I personally take it really hard when someone questions my integrity. I love that word. May have been the only thing I was given from my family. And throughout my education and professional career, I've tried to utilize it every chance I can. We have a bifurcated system in this county that was created by both statutes and the Arizona Constitution. And by its nature, the election process has been bifurcated. It's true that we have an elected recorder, clerk, sheriff, board of supervisors. What did I miss?
Technically, the clerk of the board is not an elected official.
Okay, so
County attorney.
county attorney. Those people are all, the board of supervisors is equal to the recorder, etc., all the other elected officials. I once had a noted professor from the U of A who studied Arizona's Constitution and these offices described it to me as a system of poobahs that were all equal. He'd been around for a number of years. He was deeply suspicious of how it worked. He made a name for himself at the university. I think he may be dead now. Fairness to him, I can't remember his name. Unfortunately, that's a feature of my old age. But he was a well-known person, well-versed in it. This past election was my first experience hands-on at the election process. I know I drove Brad crazy. I think he had a whole head of hair before he started. I know that I could not have done a lot of the things that I did without input from David, who sits in the room, for which I want to thank him for his accommodations, and Mary and Ann Lilly as well. And I went over to the recorder's office for one day, but I asked too many questions over there. It was considered disruptive, I suppose, and I was asked to leave after the first day. Now, there's a difference in the way those two offices work, and everybody has their own management style, and I had no problems with the recorder's request. I looked around at one point, and she had at least 7 or 8 observers in the room, and you know what, I would have been in her position early on before the 7 or 8 were even allowed in her room. Just way too many. So she did what she did, and that's okay. I'm not saying I deserved it, but I understand. There were other people that were also asked to leave time to time. Now, I did nothing disruptive intentionally. As many of you know, as I'm a former practicing CPA, large companies, I looked at systems. Large audit firms look at systems to see how they ensure the integrity of financial statements, and that applies to integrity of ballots. I love the notion that we want a paper trail in here. I think that's absolutely incredibly good. But our name implies that we're somehow overseeing what the recorder does, particularly the facts that I'll come back to in the elections, as well as the Board of Elections. Now, as painful as this may be, we need to talk about this. Because if there is one person on the outside, or two people on the outside, that believe that the Pima County Election Integrity Commission has responsibilities beyond the Board of Elections, the Elections Department, they're mistaken. But that name implies it. You could say cynically, it gives the Board of Supervisors someone to, if they have a problem, to say, well, Election Integrity Commission never raised an issue, so on and so forth. You could say that. You could say that maybe we're not very important to them at all. Obviously, we have no budget. I don't ever see any of them appearing. I don't see us giving them a monthly report. So I want to say that, state that I want us to think about what our name implies. What is allowed to be perceived. I also want to say for the record that, in my opinion, assuming the database for the recorder is correct, assuming the registration process is unflawed, assuming that the ballots that were actually requested, that were mail-in ballots were actually requested, assuming that the signature review process is correct, assuming that we have a bifurcated system where we ask for both photo ID and signature when we go to vote at the polls, but we don't do that when we mail in a ballot, assuming that's okay. Anything that got into the system, in my opinion, was processed. Now, we have some minor things we could point out, this and that. Little things that question whether or not the checks and balances are in place. I want to have a continued discussion about this. I want this on the agenda as a recurring item so we can talk about this in some depth at each issue. I want this commission, if we can, to adopt a series of questions that are hard to ask, difficult to think about. The can's been kicked down the road, as Bill says. But I want us to be a little more proactive about what our responsibilities are if we're going to have the name Pima County Election Integrity Commission. This is not some fool's errand we're on in here. I really love this country. And
You get to what you proposed the name change would be?
I don't have a name to propose. If you had to make a name proposal to this, do we call this the Pima County Director of Elections Integrity Commission? Well, that kind of sounds a little phony all by itself.
We are an advisory commission to the Board of Supervisors. If we make a name change, that should.
They have to do that, we understand.
Well, no, it's not so much that, but that is, if we're going to change away from strictly saying election integrity, it should be that we are the Pima County Election Advisory Commission to the Board of Supervisors.
That's subject to everybody else's thinking on that, but that's not unacceptable to me.
Because that does cover exactly what we do. We advise the Board of Supervisors. And we try to make good advice.
I think part of the problem here is the question of what is our role regarding the recorder's office? And when this commission started, the recorder's office was very much involved. They did come to the meetings. Isn't that correct, Brad?
Certainly more than, they were available to come and speak much more frequently than they have been recently. what constraints may be on them, I couldn't say. So I'm not suggesting that they are stonewalling, I'm just saying that they were able to beat us early.
I think there were some incidents that occurred that sort of turned them off, and I would much rather leave the door open. They certainly opened the door on their side when they invited us to come attend FM's presentation last week. And I would rather leave the door open and be friendly, and I assume that we will eventually get back to where we were at some previous point.
I do think there is directly to your point, there is an issue because in our bylaws, yes, we're strictly an advisory commission to the Pima County Board of Supervisors about the elections department. However, there is that little caveat at the end that talks about election integrity and the faith of the public in the voting process in Pima County. That by default means you gotta pay attention to what's going on in the recorder's office and technically in the treasurer's office and the school superintendent's office, because both of those also have some role to play in the election process in the state of Arizona. We have no authority other than making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. However, I think this commission and its membership over the years, both present and former members, have brought experience and knowledge to the discussion of election laws, election procedures in general that frankly go beyond advising the Pima County Board of Supervisors. I've always taken my role on this commission as trying to advocate for the things I support, but by doing it strictly in terms of, okay, Board of Supervisors, this is an issue, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, there's a problem that needs to be addressed. We're asking you, get the Board of Supervisors together and push the Pima County lobbyists to advocate for some of these changes, even if they affect the recorder's office or the treasurer's office, because they directly go to whether or not election integrity and the faith of the public, perceived or not, is a moving target that goes toward better integrity, better faith in the process. I think John raises a very valid point, and to that issue, we would be well advised as members of this commission to, if not formally change the name of the commission, whether there's support for that or not, have a conversation on a regular basis about these things that don't directly affect his office, but go to that public perception, because that is a serious problem. It would be like, the plumber comes to the house to fix the plumbing, but he only deals with the leaky faucet. He doesn't deal with the leak under the sink and the clogged drain out toward the sewer connection in the street. Okay, you fix the leak, what about the rest of the problems, okay? It doesn't really solve the homeowner's real problem.
Well, I understand that. The question is, what's the best way to deal with it? To try to force them into it, try to say, okay, we don't have anything to do with it, admit it, or try to leave the door open and see if we can, in a friendly way, get a little more cooperation. And I would prefer the latter.
So, no, go ahead, you started.
There's another bigger picture piece of this. If I put my old systems engineering hat on from my previous life, back in that world, we defined systems and put our context diagrams around the subsystems and inside there. And if I take the word elections, what is it? What is that system comprised of, okay? Frankly, all we've talked about in almost a year I've been here is voting, right? I mean, anybody talk about anything, we talk about the voting process, he does the poll process, tabulating the votes, and that kind of thing. One conversation I recall was about the security of the voter registration database. But the elections comprise the system, and there's this thing called voters. Okay? That's the elephant in the room.
Good luck with that recommendation.
What?
Good luck with it.
I'm not suggesting anything except the fact that if we're talking about elections, there's this whole subsystem that's over here called voters, and we just choose not to go there.
The topic is changing the name of the commission. Do we have a proposal for a specific name change to discuss?
We do not have a proposal. I want to discuss it I would like to continue this item in the next, just for the next session, but beyond that, I just want to leave you with this thought for a second. According to David's tabulation, Board of Elections, we had 393 votes, 393,352 votes this past election cycle, general election. I won't go into the details by office. 312,400 were voted by mail, or early ballots, whatever you want to call that process. We're making great strides for the 64,731 people that voted at the precinct level, which turned out on Voters' Day, and the 16,221 resulting votes from the provisional conditional process. I think there were 18,360 or thereabouts provisional conditional ballots cast. Now, within the system, we're talking about 80%, if I'm not mistaken, of the folks that voted by mail. Brad's people do a great job of counting it. The recorder does all the verification of it and the issuance of it. When we go to count these votes, and Barbara, you and I sat there and watched it, the girls go boom, 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 shove them in the machine, and Trey A spits out a batch, and it takes us maybe twice as long to count mail-in ballots as it does regular ballots. Once they're in the counting room and run through the machine. Then we have the whole operation on the other side, which drives everybody crazy, because you can see all these ladies doing this wonderful job of counting the ballots and putting them in piles and making duplicates from one person to another. And if there's a problem with that, double checking it to make sure it's right, and so on and so forth. The system is there, and once the ballot hits the House, with some minor twists. I don't even want to talk about the minor twists at all.
I think we're getting way off the agenda.
But
item.
what I'm trying to say, yes, we are, but not in this sense.
Well,
Well, no, let me finish. 80% of the votes that the Pima County election integrity system talks about are not election integrity really looked at. You could almost say 100% aren't looked at if you don't look at the recorder Department of Transportation voter registration process.
Can I suggest that the next meeting we change the name of the topic of the agenda item so that we can discuss these things? This is
Sure.
not
From
We're
name to
supposed to
scope.
talk on the things that are on the agenda. A lot of that isn't really on the agenda.
Okay, well, I don't mean to hurt the agenda. I don't mean to.
You have people on this commission that have been through an open meeting lawsuit related to discussing things that are not on the agenda. And we have given you more than enough latitude deviating from a change of the
All right.
name. When it comes to future agenda items, between now and then, figure out what you want to call this, and we'll put it on the agenda next month.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Tabulation software update, Brad.
For those of you who may not be familiar with the term software update, we're talking about the tabulation software. We are currently, and I'm going to look at David to see whether he nods in agreement or shakes his head, we are on a version of ES&S, meaning Election Systems and Softwares, EMS, meaning Election Management System, EBS 2210.
5220.
Thank you, 3220. I knew I was going to get the numbers transposed in there somewhere. At any rate, there is going to be a new version, and so I reached out to the vendor of that particular software and asked him, where are we in the process? His answer is, we are waiting to hear from the Arizona Secretary of State on getting the exam date. I'm guessing that's a demonstration, but I'm not certain. They have everything they need from our end, so we are expecting an early to mid-March test date, presumably a demonstration, and approval by mid-April.
So sometime in the spring.
Yeah.
We are
And
talking, how many updates?
I think some updates that are passed out there in the universe are sometimes state-specific. For example, here in Arizona, we don't have straight party voting, but they may need that in some other states. So there are other versions that are maybe higher in number, but they're not applicable to what we do here. But I think 6,010 is out and about right now, and I think we're gonna go to 60/20, but that could change.
So is it tentatively called 60/20?
I believe so.
And would this one correct some of the problems we had with saving images and with those things?
My understanding is it's going to fix a lot of problems. I won't say it'll fix all, but certainly there are going to be much quicker saving of digital images will be around, and much better, meaning more finer detail reporting for any type of forensic one needs to do after the election is over.
Only because that data image was a sticking point for a number of members. This predates about half the people in this room right now. Basically, the first version that came out, it took, I won't say forever, but it seemed to take forever to download from the tabulation equipment to the election management software, hours and hours and hours and hours, because it was literally every single image. It was the way they handled the data. Subsequently, that's been fixed. Are we still expecting a further increase in the efficiency of that download?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's something I never did understand. I mean, 35% of the internet traffic right now is radiographs.
Is what?
And X-rays. And when you're transmitting a mammogram and you're impacting a woman's life that way, and if it moved as slow as these images move, people would die waiting on image transmission. So the technology is available. Why ESNS doesn't use it is an anathema to me. So hopefully they'll fix the problem. Chris?
Brad, when it comes time for upgrading, could you let me know, because I'd like to be an observer?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, just let the
it'll
commission
be
know
up in
as well.
Phoenix.
I beg your pardon?
We'll be up in Phoenix, that would.
So the demonstration of their product, meaning the software and what it can do, will be done in Phoenix. And the Arizona Secretary of State has a state certification board that has a member of the state bar, a member of the, one of the technical departments within the major university. I think right now it's a gentleman from Arizona State University, and a person who is knowledgeable in election processes. That's usually somebody from the Secretary of State's office. They'll review that information, and then they will make a recommendation to the Secretary of State, and then she'll either give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
I'm talking about when it's installed in our.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but yes, we'll let everybody know when it's installed locally here.
Sure.
Brad, if I may, this is specifically for those of us that are new to this commission and new to your operation, strictly for how many voters?
This is all voters. This is the tabulation system.
That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
This will be the software that counts all votes, basically what we have now, just an updated
It's
version.
not
It's
this.
not that.
Not that.
Yeah,
No,
Okay, I'm sorry.
the analogy would be an update on your software on your phone.
Yeah.
I made the same mistake before the meeting started, so.
Yeah,
Something that I would like one of you two to figure out, you know, I think it's a little bit ludicrous that we have to count noses every time we have something election related to make sure that we don't have a quorum of this commission in the room. There are, I know the Oro Valley Town Council does it, there's basically a blanket statement that says, there are social functions where there may be a quorum of members present, but business is not being discussed. You know, we were trying to figure out, I think it was you, me, Barbara, John.
You're gonna get Chuck to sign off on that idea?
You know, there's gotta be a way to deal with it where, you know, a board of supervisors meeting where they're discussing elections, the fact that we can't have a quorum show up. When we went down to the treasurer's office to look at ballot storage, but only 5 of us could be there because we
Yeah.
have a quorum. That's stupid.
Brian, now you're off the agenda.
I apologize. Getting back on track.
so often, one of those little gems of wisdom.
Touche.
We all have our faults. I think that's the
Can we
point
have
down there.
more, please?
Okay, Brad, next, proposed changes to the HAVA system.
So HAVA stands for Help America Vote Act. This was federal legislation in the aftermath of the near virtual tie between Mr. Bush and Mr. Gore in Florida. Among many things that it came out with were standards for voting technology. I didn't include this because HAVA is a fairly thick piece of legislation. But Section 301 talks about voting systems and standards, and the section that's applicable to what we're about to talk about today is, it says accessibilities for individuals with disabilities. The voting system shall, and then it goes on, and the most important process here is that be accessible to individuals with disabilities, including non-visual accessibility for the blind or visually impaired, in a manner that provides them the same opportunity for access and participation, including privacy and independence for voters. Prior to the passage of this law, there was no requirement to have a piece of voting equipment in polling places, not just here in Arizona, but elsewhere at the federal level, that a person with a disability was able to use and gain some increased independence in the secrecy of the ballot. We have been adhering to that particular federal statute by having what's commonly referred to as our touch screens within our voting locations, both at the polling places as well as in the walk-in early voting environment. That equipment has always been a little awkward to use for voters, for poll workers, and even for my staff in getting it together and delivered and things of that nature. So it's reached its end of life. We have begun to use, this is a product slip, so if it sounds like they're really rah-rah, and this is the greatest piece of equipment in the world, take it from me, that's not my saying, that is the vendor of this particular equipment. Now, the reason why we are going with this equipment is that it is compatible with the system that we currently have, meaning the election tabulation software. Yes.
The DSNS 650.
That's correct. Yeah. And indeed, we have been using this equipment for duplication processes that some of you may have been able to witness, where a ballot comes in that is, I'll call it the bubble ballot, where you color in the bubble by the candidate, and it's spoiled in such a way the voter has since left the polling place or whatever, you are then able to duplicate the ballot here. But so that's the environment that we've used it previously, not at polling places, but strictly within our offices to duplicate ballots.
But the recorder uses that product for early voting, do they?
Not yet.
They use something like it then?
They use something like it, yes. That is that legacy touchscreen system that I kind of referred to earlier. So this is what we're proposing to go to. David's got a couple of them set up back here in the back. We don't necessarily need to adjourn from our tables now for all of you to go use them. But to give you a little background on this, you'll notice on your slick, there's a device down here that enables an individual to be able to navigate through the ballot, even if they're not able to see what's on the screen because of a vision impairment. And then an audio headphone will be attached as well, and will be able to walk them through the ballot and tell them how they have cast their ballot. And the audio, as well as the text, if they do have some visual abilities to them, can be in either the English language or a Spanish language here within the Pima County. It also has the availability that if you have certain problems with your eyesight in reading the color green or the color red or things of that nature, it can actually change the contrast so that you can actually read it yourself. It can also increase the text size. David, if I'm saying anything to the contrary, let me know. Okay, and then when it actually prints out the ballot, pardon for looking for my prop, the ballot stock that goes in the machine is completely blank. It is inserted in the machine. I'm simplifying here, so there may be some questions that are a little bit more detailed. Goes into the machine. The person uses either the touch screen if they have vision, or the adaptable device there. Counts, processes their ballot. They are able to review their ballot, audio. They are also, this then, once they are satisfied, is printed and comes out of the machine, and it displays only the candidates that they voted for. So for example, there may be multiple candidates running for a school board. it will highlight on this ballot that it's for school board XYZ, but only the particular candidates they have voted for. This then is processed through central count 850s like it has been in the past. The touchscreen does prohibit you from overvoting. So if it's a vote for one and you're attempting to do more than the candidates than you're allowed to do, you actually have to go in and deselect the candidate that you originally voted for and then vote for your particular candidate there as well. It has the ability to do write-in candidates. If you happen to touch the particular part of the screen that says I want to do a write-in, you are able to do a write-in, and the write-in's name, Joe Smith, will actually appear on this ballot as well.
What does it do to prompt you if you're undervoting? I know it will tabulate an undervote, but it says.
So on the screen itself, because you're still on this marking device, and that's all it is, it knows the parameters of an office. So for this office, it's a vote for one. So if you try and vote for two, it's not going to let you.
Right, but if it's a vote for two and you only vote for one, does it give you any kind of a prompt?
It potentially can. That is the availability. At the end of your process, you have the availability to review all of your votes. Still on the screen, not on the piece of paper, and it will tell you you have the availability to vote for X number of candidates and you voted for Y. And if you want to do it that way, you can. But it will not let you overvote. It will certainly allow you to undervote.
Do you know if the write-ins get coded in the barcode?
I have no idea. Beyond my knowledge.
Yes, they do.
They do, the actual, so this was typing it in or writing it in?
The voter types it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the text is put into Barton, so, okay. The barcode they show on this doesn't look like it could contain as much information as it's sounding like, so maybe this was a small sample or something.
Would it only barcode the official candidates, official write-in candidates, and not Mickey
No.
Mouse?
Mickey Mouse or whatever they type in is what is included in the barcode.
I just want to state for the record that we will now have handicap devices that effectively operate as the scanners, not allowing overvoting at the polling location, except for the fact that that only will apply to people that use the handicap device. The regular voter won't have that option because we don't have scanners at the polls.
Okay.
Sorry, it's a problem.
Yeah, it
PAVA
is.
also allows you to not have scanners at the polls.
Do we allow people who are not handicapped to use that device if they choose?
In the past, the answer has been no. That's a direction that I've come up with. This equipment was provided under law. And so on the exterior of that machine, after it's set up for voting use, there has been in the past a bright orange as this here with black print on it. It basically has the disabled sign, the usual symbol with a person in a wheelchair, and it says, this product was purchased under public law, blah, 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 and is intended for use for disabled voters only. And in class that Mr. Dale teaches, I haven't been in one of his classes recently, but when I was teaching a class, it's like, if you are somebody who's pulling up to Walgreens, and you have one of the necessary symbols hanging from your rearview mirror, by all means, use that space. But if you're not eligible to use that space because you don't have the necessary medical exemption on it, then don't use it, because you could be using it when somebody with a vision impairment comes in and has to wait for you to process through. So the answer is, technically, yes, they could use that device, but I'm likely to move it forward to in that same kind of realm of using a disabled spot in front of a choice order.
But the workers aren't really allowed to ask the person about their disability, are they?
Correct, no.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
And in the past, for the 2016, not 2018, but the 2016, I bring that up because it's a presidential election where we have the most people usually turning out. About 20 people used the touchscreen device at the walk-in early voting locations, and about 25 people countywide used it during the presidential election at the public places. So it has been used very sparingly. As we roll this out, we will also be reaching out to the disabled community advocates to see whether they have any recommendations going forward.
How does this compare time-wise with voting the paper ballots? Any idea?
If you have no visual disability.
If you were if you were a disqualified handicapped person, if you have no impairments, and you were voting with this device as opposed to stepping into the kiosk and voting a paper ballot.
I've never timed it.
Okay.
My guess is that just as today, you can have people that are in and out of that booth in a snap, and they're in that booth for hours. Yeah, so I couldn't say.
Okay, I thought this, and I realize this is a manufacturer's product, Slick, and it probably purveys information that is less than factual, but, you know, looking at this and having a little bit of an understanding of how the recorder handles the early voting process, basically when they have somebody come in, they have to verify who they are, which precinct they're in, and set the device that they use to bring up the candidates that they can vote on in that particular precinct.
Right.
Okay, does this device have that same functionality?
The device itself does not. Okay.
Okay,
There's a lot of ways that this device can be used. In most places, and including some places here within the state of Arizona, there is an electronic poll book. So you come into the polling place, they look you up, they find you that you are registered to vote. It's probably in a vote center situation to where you can show up wherever you want. And then there will be a device between the voter registration e-poll book and this device, and you'll actually put this in, put some of those initial barcodes at the top that will say, this is for the Democratic Party in precinct 52. They then take it to the device, slide it in, and the exact ballot will show up for that individual. Absent of that, and the way that we have used it, meaning absent of an e-poll book and that barcode pre-stamped, if you will, what's going to have to happen is that in an early voting environment, they're going to have to go over, they meaning the clerk that's assisting the voter, will go over and have a menu of all of the various precinct styles, push the appropriate button, insert the ballot, and then walk away.
you know, looking at the device and reading the literature, to go to Bill's point, where people that are handicapped are prevented from overvoting, but nobody else is at the polling place. Having these devices replace paper ballots, this is a little visionary and altruistic possibly, but you know, when you walk into the polling place, you get that blank piece of paper, so we're not printing up any ballots. Based on who you are and what precinct you're in, somehow that machine knows which ballot you're allowed to vote. You stick the blank piece of paper in to do your vote. It's not connected to the internet anyway, so it eliminates the electronic capture of data. You do have a paper trail because you get the paper ballot out. That in no way has anything to do with tabulation, although I'm assuming you could verify the count on the box with the count of the paper ballots. And the system we have is capable of counting these paper ballots. So,
To take it a little bit further, I don't think I'm going far afield from your comment. In Mojave County, as I said, this device has been used with the poll books and that little pre-stamp, if you will. They've done something even more involved, and that is that here on the device itself, there's a scanner that reads a barcode or a QR code. In Mojave's environment, if you request, let me rephrase that. If you get a ballot, sample ballot, not an early ballot, a sample ballot sent to your mobile device, you can vote that sample ballot on your mobile device. And then when you come into the polling place on election day, it reads that QR code and populates the screen with the way that you voted. You can still change it, but it actually populates the screen, and then if you're good to go, you push the button and out you go.
Nice.
There.
So there is one.
No paper trail?
Oh, right here. Right here. And the voter gets to verify that, saying, yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
So there is a little
So-
hitch there. So it says both human readable, so human and barcode are on that thing. And so So I use that and I look at it and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant to do, good. But I'm looking at the human readable part. Someplace this is counted, and it's not reading the part that I just verified. It's reading something that I couldn't read. And I know somebody who could read barcodes, just they could tell you what it said, and they could modify it. And so so it is possible to modify barcode so it's still valid but different. And the fact that, that the human is reading one thing and the machine is reading another means that they could be different at some point. Shocking.
Let me get to that a little bit because it is pertinent to what he has to say. And I'm not saying this solves that problem.
Okay.
But I put my ballot in that has that information there on the top, and all that does is tell me what precinct variation ballot style I'm able to vote. Comes up on the screen, I do my thing, it comes out and I read it, I can put it back in the machine to read it and see whether what I read with my human eye is what it's reading with its, if you will, machine eye.
Right.
Don't know whether that's
better.
accessible.
That helps.
John? You have a comment?
No, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I think it's answered.
Bill? Oh, come on, Bill.
I'll do it.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
The question is, Brad, where does that lead us as we go down the road? The way we vote now, the 68,000 odd people that voted the election and went in and took an ink pen and marked a little circle and all of that, and then stuck it in the gray lock boxes. Does this lead us towards that with a smaller ballot eventually? More of these, wherever that thing is.
I
People
would-
voting with these at the precinct level as opposed to,
I think I'll give you a qualified yes, that it may change the way we vote in the future if we go to that electronic poll book vote center environment.
and how would this, maybe we should put this on the agenda for going forward, because this is a bigger question, but how does this then translate to the whole issue of mail-in ballots being the major portion? No, I'm wondering if it translates to a more convenient mail-in ballot kind of a system, or 80% of our counts, 80% of your work is generated through the mail.
But unless we're going to put one of these machines in every household, it's not going to
Well, I
affect
don't-
that.
But he just, he made a rather interesting statement. You put it on this, and then you went and you did that.
Okay, Bill.
What's the budgetary impact going to be? Because you've got to have one of these for each polling location, you've got to have backups, the report, you know,
It's
there's.
a grant, right?
We have a little bit of money left from our HAVA grant, but most of that was spent in 2006 to adhere to HAVA when it first came out of the gate. Okay. So it's going to cost approximately $1.2 million to put one of these in each one of our polling places and have some spares for training and early voting and things of that nature.
Funded mandate.
Well, I know there's always, you know, interest in getting the state to pay for part of that, but in terms of where Pima County is in relation to the other counties and their handicapped assisted devices, are we at the forefront of needing to replace ours because of everything that changed in 2006, or are we kind of in the middle? Others have gone before us in terms of, the reason I ask that, because if this is going to be a budgetary impact at a statewide level, there's going to be some interest up there to.
Well, certainly the 800-pound gorilla in the room is Maricopa
Right.
County when it finally gets out of its legacy system. So, Coconino County is still on its old legacy system as well. So as individuals have moved from optical scan, where we used to be, to digital scan, where we are now, they have usually had to also not come up with not just new software, but new hardware in the polling places. So surrounding us right now, with the exception of Pinal County, and when I surrounding us, I mean by counties that are actually adjacent to us, everybody has these, okay? Pinal County, as you might recall, in 2004, had their elections warehouse burned completely to the ground with all their election equipment inside of it. So it has a device called an AutoMark, which you actually use a full-sized, if you will, bubble ballot, put it in the machine, and then an inkjet printer fills in the ovals in the appropriate place. You take that out and it looks no different than a ballot that has been voted by somebody who is, for lack of a better term, able-bodied. So I guess I would say we're kind of in the middle, towards the top.
So, if I may, it seems to me the precincts that I observed, and I looked at 2 of them, there happened to be 2 precincts at one polling place where I was observing. There was one person that needed this kind of a system voting. And the population of the number of voters in this last election is around 200, is that correct?
That use the accessible device?
Yes.
No, I would probably say it's maybe 60 or under. I don't have the exact numbers, but they're under 100 for sure.
Under 100.
And probably under 30 at the polls.
Okay, so is this a device strictly for those 30 to 60 people? That we're talking about spending $1.1 million?
In a manner of speaking, yes. In other words, the population of disabled voters who go to the polls and have used the touchscreen equipment in the past has always been under 100 people. So, yes, it is, but it is as I mentioned earlier, the federal law says you gotta have one of these devices in all the polls.
Is this another case where federal law says you gotta do this, but they don't give you the money?
Unfunded mandate.
Well, when HAVA first was launched out into the national spectrum, there were buckets of money out there. So and that's how we got the legacy system we have right now. So that was purchased with HAVA funds. Now when that legacy system needs to be retired, it's our own pocket from here on out.
But let me follow it up a little bit. You can see this is probably the bean counter in me, it's as opposed to the social engineering part. The system we have now that serves a population that's less than 100 is out of date because, or it would be replaced because?
I have begun to receive civil, but very stern complaints from disabled voters saying that they cannot get this equipment, the legacy equipment we have right now, to work. They do not find it convenient. They wish to vote their right under HAVA to vote independently and in private, and please fix this.
Okay.
So to avoid, well, to do things. 1, to give them what they need. 2, to comply with the law, and
Avoid
2.1, yes, avoid DOJ coming down here with an ADA complaint.
So if we did not provide one of these at each polling place and at each early voting place, we are not complying with DOJ requirements?
Federal law, yes.
Okay, so the issue is not how much is it per ballot, so to speak, or voter. The issue is we have to do something. We've got some kind of a complaint now. And the levels of complaints that are now, are any of them, in the categories they fall in, they must have some categories, I'm assuming. I witnessed a lady come in and they had to end up reading the ballots to her, the inspector did. And with her, I don't know whether it was her father or her husband. And it worked, seemed to work. But what is it that is inconvenient? I mean, I realize that was a voluntary process, that not everybody wants the inspector or whoever's at the poll worker to do that. Do they fall, do the level of complaints fall in some categories that could be addressed and I don't want to say fixed, but maybe fixed is the only term I can come to the head, that would say, okay, now we've had 100 complaints, we've addressed 30 of them as a category, we've got another 30 maybe we can address, and then there's 30 we can't. Does it fall that way? How do we, to me, $1.1 million is a lot of money. It's not that we don't have to, I'm unwilling to spend it if we have to spend it. But to me, that's seems like a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, and that's why I've been hanging on to this legacy system for as long as I can.
Right.
But the complaints from very civil disabled voters are saying, we've almost reached our limit.
Okay.
The legacy system does not have the capability to accommodate visually impaired voters, true or false?
That is false. It does accommodate visually impaired voters.
And that was the case I observed. But I think the machine had some issue. She either couldn't hear, she also couldn't hear, or,
It is extremely awkward.
and
This is-
and I think her father had to use sign language to her. I don't remember how that went exactly. It was difficult.
But,
If you're in a situation where you're using sign language, anybody in the room that happens to know how to sign can overhear your conversation.
you'd be surprised how many different languages are used in polling places.
So would it be inappropriate to ask you to give us a more detailed report on what the nature of the complaints are and how it might work as going
I
forward?
certainly can, but I will tell you, and I don't mean to sound obstinate, it's not gonna change anything.
Okay.
I've got to comply with the federal law.
And gotta comply means by when?
I gotta, well, basically, these disabled voters have said, let's get this fixed by 2020.
2020,
Yeah.
okay. So we're looking at the next general election.
Correct. Well, the next presidential preference election, which is less than a year from now.
Again, my senior,
Oh,
my senior status on the commission, I can remember conversations with some of the hardware folks when we were looking at different systems. The average lifespan of some of these systems is built to be about 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
That's
And the
it.
system we have is how old now?
We purchased it in 2006. It's 2002 technology.
Yeah, so.
And isn't some of it breaking down? And-
Tons of it is
Okay.
breaking down.
Is there, what happens if you don't put this at every location? I guess you're in violation of the federal statutes.
And these ladies and gentlemen who have written to me thus far civilly have said, you know, your time is running out.
I have a question. Is the machine you're thinking of buying exactly the same as the one we have now, or is it an upgraded version?
What we have been using now, because we've been using it internally, we've not had the disabled access available to it, but other than that, it's going to be exactly the same.
Somebody has to ask this difficult question, I suppose, it's a dependent on me. Is there an alternative to this by saying, look, request the vote, it will come out, and we have what, how many polling locations do we have?
248.
And how many extras would we need?
Extra.
Machines?
We're probably going to purchase around 300.
So if we had to buy 300 machines, that's 1.1 million, approximately. But if you had a hotline, so to speak, where they could call and somebody could take the machine and go to them, for less than 100 people we're talking about, is that an answer?
Well, I have heard many ladies and gentlemen saying, if you don't go to the polling place, you're cheapening your vote.
Well, that's.
Yes.
So,
I own it and I'm happy to.
Well,
so there is,
I understand that, and I'm trying to be somewhat compassionate. These people have dignity and they deserve the dignity. But is there another answer is what I mean, if we think
So
outside the box?
On that, has anyone considered the possibility of consolidating all of the, for want of a better term, handicapped voting into one place?
Oh, no.
Do you want to defend that lawsuit?
so,
Well, that's in effect what we would do if we did this, I think.
there is, I'm not certain what the county recorder terms this as, but within statutes, there is the availability of having what's called a sick and disabled team come to your location. There is a member of the clerk's office who has been deputized. They are a mix of political parties. They bring the ballot presumably to your hospital bed or care center, wherever you may be. You vote it, put it in the envelope, give it back to them, and then they take it in to be tabulated. Additionally, on the sample ballot that's mailed to individual households, there is a small symbol, again, of the disabled voter or a disabled person and says that, you know, if you are wondering whether there are any accessibility issues to the polling place you are to attend, please give us a call 72 hours in advance so that we might address any specific problem that you might have. So, and then even further is that if they go to the polling place and for whatever reason are not able to actually access the room, we can always bring curbside voting out to them. So there are many options available, but it comes down to federal law says I'm supposed to have a device in each polling place that allows a disabled person, and that's another question. You know, what is disabled?
I'm disabled.
Yeah, exactly. You could have a cognitive disability. You could have a physical acuity disability. So there is no one device. A lot of people say, well, what if I'm paraplegic and deaf and dumb and everything else, and there's no machine out there that's going to handle everything. But the focus, as it mentions in the text of the law, is that the focus is predominantly on people with vision impairment, either total blindness or things of that nature. So
is there, given the amount of money that's involved, given how that would be could be much better spent with, within the department itself, the restraints on funds are not uncommon these days. I'm assuming Pima County has some problems with funds. Is there a DOJ approval of a plan option that where you did allow sick, what did you call them?
sick and disabled teams.
Yeah, we might have to rename that because that sounds kind of debilitating, but
Insensitive?
insensitive. And I do not want to be considered insensitive in this, because I'm not. But is there a way that this could be more readily done with let's go modern, with Uber drivers and a person that's from the attorney's office or the clerk's office or the recorder's office or your office or wherever, that could go out and do this, and would that be less expensive? More,
You know, I
I don't want to use the word expensive.
I find the conversation interesting because on the one hand, for the almost 5 years that I've been on the commission, I've listened to people advocate vehemently on behalf of polling place voting units, the right of every person to be there. But when it becomes a financial burden, we want to find a way to avoid letting people go to the polling place. I would posit that you can't have it both ways. Either people have an ultimate right to go to the polling place, and if they go to the polling place, they require HAVA compliant equipment, then you have HAVA compliant equipment there, and we quit talking about, yeah, it costs a lot of money, and is there a better way to do it? Because you essentially then are saying, you have a right to go to the polling place if you're an able-bodied person, but you don't have a right to go to the polling place if you're not an able-bodied person.
I completely agree. So do I.
I am sympathetic to your issue. I'm very sympathetic to it, not just a little sympathetic, very sympathetic. But we also have issues that are weird in the way we vote now for 60 some odd thousand people versus 300 and some odd. Why do we discourage people to go to the polling when they have to show both a signature and an ID when they could vote by mail with just by signature? Isn't that a discrimination against the people who go to the polls? I mean, we have goofy things like that in our statutes that we need to talk about.
You require ID at the polling place, the
Yeah.
signatures to keep track of who's voted.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't, you're not verifying anything with the
Well, they
signature.
certainly look at it. They certainly look at the signature. The
Well, they
signature
look
is
at the
there.
signature, but, you may or may not compare it to, you do have photographic ID that doesn't have a signature on it.
Yeah, driver's license has signature on it.
Yeah.
But
State ID has signature.
there are other forms of
But
identification.
So when I signed the book there at the polling place, they just looked to see, okay, does this match what's printed there?
Yeah.
In other words, the printed name is Christopher Douglas Cole or Christopher D. Cole now. Did I sign John Q. Public?
And when
That's all the
Christopher-
signatures.
When Christopher Cole shows up again and there's already a signature in the block, they say, oops,
That's all totally okay.
yeah. No, there's a, you're not discouraging, well, and I guess it depends on your point of view, you're not discouraging people from going to the polling place. You're providing an alternative that they do or don't have to participate in. This one, you're taking away a fundamental right by not having the capability at the polling place.
I agree.
I have a question.
Somebody put that in the minutes.
I've done it 3 times in the last 5 minutes.
I have a question going back to this device. Is this the only one that's compatible with our current tabulation system? Do we have to go out to bid? Is there any?
It is the only one that's currently offered for sale that's compatible with our system.
And it's been approved.
And that has been approved. I mentioned the AutoMark. Pinal County uses the same software, same hardware to tabulate ballots. But again, that ballot off of the AutoMark, their disabled equipment, looks exactly like the same ballot that a, if you will, an able-bodied person would vote. But it is, that AutoMark system is compatible with the tabulation system. It is not compatible with ballot layout and things of that nature.
So we don't.
To an extent,
so
I'm
there's-
fudging a little bit
So
there.
there's no bidding process involved?
No.
So their ballot mark system, you start with essentially, you start with a blank piece of paper.
No, you
You
start,
with a printed ballot.
yeah, just like any other able-bodied person, but I'm a disabled person, I go over, I slide this into the device. It, by looking at the various codes on the exterior of the ballot, knows, okay, this is a ballot from precinct 52 for the Democratic Party if we're in a primary. And then on the screen, that's what appears. Then you vote,
Okay.
or through audio headphones and a paddle, and then you say print, and it actually colors in, you actually hear the inkjet like that, and the ballot comes jogging out, and then you have a ballot that looks the same as an able-bodied
So you
person.
have a pre-printed ballot, it's just being machine marked as opposed to being human marked.
Yeah. So to use an analogy, it's kind of like you want to get to Phoenix, you take I-10 or the back roads. They both get you there, just different ways.
But that's just, the AutoMark system is no longer available.
So getting to the point where we had 15 or 20 of these at every polling location, and that's how everybody that came in here voted, would be prohibitively expensive. Or do we get a volume mistake?
No. And that's, so that's kind of it. I haven't, certainly I appreciate the input that we're receiving now and may receive in the future, but this is what I have to go to. So I'm bringing it to the commission's attention just to say, here's a change that's coming, but in order to comply with the law and have a system that's compatible with the tabulation system we have right now, this is it.
Timeline?
Yeah, I was,
Timeline.
related, I was gonna ask what budget year, this year, next year?
Next year.
And I'm assuming that these will be available for the PPV next March.
That is my understanding in talking with the vendor, is that if the Board of Supervisors approves the budget, that includes the purchase of this equipment, they will then start building them probably in May or June, and we should have them in time. Remember the PPE, I have a reduced number of polling places, so I'm gonna have enough for the PPE. In the meantime, they'll keep their inventory building up so that by the time the August primary comes along, we'll have enough for everybody.
Do you have a sample output of this that I could?
We'll be able to produce one.
Yes.
Well,
Today.
yes, I'd like to ask about the card, okay, the paper card that you're putting in. What prevents, outside of the fact that there's 100 or less votes, so if you've got 1,000 votes on these things, you would say something's amiss, maybe.
Well,
It would raise your question, it would raise questions.
it would.
What would
That's a legit.
prevent somebody just from standing there and feeding these cards through?
That's no different than what's to prevent them from doing it with the ballots that we have right now. All this-
Except that, having been a poll worker a number of times, okay, that when, let's see, it seems that the ballots are counted so that you have some check at the end. are these counted?
Yes, they are.
So that you know that you get 50 or 100
Right.
of them. and
So if you have 300 names in the poll list, meaning 300 people showed up, and 10 people voted this way, you'll have 290 if you do regular ballots, and 10 of these.
Okay, so they're gonna be counted the same way that ballots would.
Counted at the polls, meaning to
Right.
account for the piece of paper,
Right.
yes, and then counted, meaning tabulated at Election Central.
Well, and this also is a very specific size. I noticed you've got a corner crop.
Yep.
So that, you know, unless a poll worker gives a potential voter more than one of these pieces of paper, the potential voter has to know how long the paper is, how wide the paper is, which corner is cropped, and has to have a source to get all of those if they're just gonna stand there and feed it in.
And remember, the poll worker in the scenario I mentioned, and I think it's the scenario that will actually happen, is the poll worker is going to walk over with the disabled voter with a single sheet of paper, bring up the appropriate ballot style, slide it in, and then walk away. So there's a little bit of control there as well.
When you adopt these machines and they're there, since there are so few people that use them, couldn't they be available to anybody like Bill Beard who wants to make sure he didn't vote overvote or undervote or whatever, and have a policy that the disabled person is always first in line, like they do in many places like Disney World?
Let me put it this way.
Well, you could claim mental disability.
Oh, you can go because you can't question the person. Anybody can walk up and say, I'm disabled, there's nothing they can do about it, right?
May I make a statement? I know I'm not part of the commission, but I'm the one who does the poll worker training. When we deal with the touchscreen units that we currently have, when I talk about who's allowed to use these, we show them that there's a sign that's hung on the
The big
machine.
orange thing.
The big orange sign that says this, for disabled use only. I tell poll workers that it is for disabled use only. However, anybody who asks to use that machine can use that machine, because you cannot inquire as to what the person's disability is. Just because you can't physically see that person is disabled or not, doesn't mean they don't have a disability and can't use that if they want to. So the whole deal is if somebody asks to use the machine, they're welcome to do so.
It's kind of like emotional therapy dogs.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there's a
It all goes back to HIPAA laws and things like that. That's what it-
There is a practical side to it. I know this for sure, at least in 2 counties, and it's probably more, where they have lines and all of the kiosks are full. There are poll workers that will routinely tell people, go use the handicap device if there's no handicap people using it at the time, just to speed the process. And I know that happens frequently in some counties. Maricopa specifically, and Canal's the other one I've heard it.
Yeah, I want to start bringing my emotional T-Rex.
See, you guys alligators?
Okay, anything else on the heavy, John?
I do think it might be appropriate for us to understand this piece of equipment a little bit better as to how it might apply going forward. Certainly the equipment we have now has a lifespan and will have to be replaced at some point or another. Is this a down payment, so to speak, on the way we might futurely vote at all the polls? Given that there's less than 100, we're spending $1 million, and we have less than 100, we have 60,000 who go to the polls, and so on and so forth. I'm just trying, I'm not doing the math, I'm just thinking ahead.
I think if you were to look at the trend, polling places are going away. I mean, you may not like that, but polling places are going away. It's going to replace with, in vote centers, or voting from home in some electronic form, not just a paper ballot, I've got no idea. Certainly, my kids who are in their 20s and 30s see absolutely no reason why they have to do anything other than something on here. So internet
That's how
voting
they order
is
their
coming.
breakfast from the second floor bedroom to mom's kitchen.
Yeah. But because the public is going to demand convenience, which is, in my opinion, why the majority of people vote early right now.
So would it be appropriate then to have this discussion on another meeting as to where we're at with the equipment? What its lifespan we see going forward, so this, as we're thinking of things, a better whiz bang here, so to speak, that we understand all that.
Election equipment, unless there's a big change in legislation, usually lasts about 10 to 12 years. And then you've got to replace it for a variety of reasons. So the hardware that we purchased at Central Count right now is approximately 2 years old right now. It's got another 10 years before it's likely to go out the door. What that new thing is going to be, I've got no idea.
How old is Maricopa's system?
Mid-90s.
Yeah,
It's been old.
Yeah, mid-90s.
Just a history lesson, partly to you, but just for the other new members. How old was the GEM system when we finally, it had been around since?
That gets into the, when was it?
Right, I know.
When was it launched and when did we
Why I
buy
asked the
it?
question.
Yeah, it was actually launched because I saw it in its early stages in the mid-80s.
And
We
that was
purchased-
just replaced 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay? This is a problem with these systems. We rely on them to do a lot of things, but they have a natural age span. For one simple reason, you can't purchase replacement parts for some of these things, and by default, you have to go to a new system. Some of the stuff we were using prior to 2 years ago, we were cannibalizing, and we also would have had to go out to, potentially, if we had to keep it for one more cycle, out to eBay and whatnot, trying to find replacement parts for some of the basic mechanics of the system. That is not a healthy thing.
And we weren't
And that's part of the problem that was it North Carolina had, their equipment was so old.
Palm Beach
And
County
also
as well.
it depended on an older version of the operating system.
Yeah,
which
we were
could be
on
updated.
Windows
Something really old.
NT or 95 or.
Yeah.
It was bad.
And you couldn't update it
Yeah.
to the system.
So what do you have in the county plan? I'm assuming there is a county plan somewhere.
I know. Put that on the agenda for next month to talk about the county plan. But we are, again, deviating from the budget. We're on to general equipment, not the house system, Levoy.
May I, just real quick, back on the house system.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times here, there was an interesting comment I thought was worth a thought. We all agree that we make every effort to make sure the person should be able to get to the polls and cast a vote.
If that's their choice.
If that's their choice, or whatever. Then we learned that this system, this is a nice whiz-bang system. They can tell me if I best my vote. What is the role of government in assisting the voting process in that regard? I would think my Libertarian friend would have some thoughts on that, but I haven't heard from him. I mean,
I try not to dominate the conversation.
here we have a machine that is editing the votes. Is that the role of the government, and this is not going to answer today, obviously, is the role of the government to assist the voter in that regard?
Okay, you asked my thoughts on this. Overvote, undervote, I can see where there is a responsibility for the system saying, do you intend to undervote? Saying, did you intend to vote for this candidate or vote yes on this proposition? I'm going to get my battle axe out.
I don't think it has any business doing any of that, because we have a right to screw up.
We have a right to vote too.
And why do we go to the polls? No, most of the people go to the polls, they mark these ballots, they do it. If you screw up, you screw up, okay? I'm sorry, I'm a person that, I have to believe in personal responsibility. And what's the
Yeah,
role?
we're a little off, but directly to that point, Arizona law requires that anything that is an overvote be discarded, and if the intent of the voter is the whole idea of this process, if mechanically the poll workers, etc., can notify the customer that they have overvoted when it may not have been their intention, then,
And we have gone from a system of notifying the voter about overvotes when we had scanners at the polling
Correct.
places to not notifying voters about overvotes when we no longer have scanners,
Because
to
of budgetary.
notifying people of overvotes if they're handicapped. It's a mixed bag, and what happens is reality is somewhere in reality.
Right, well, the comment wasn't my intention to run there, but like, guess what, he get a ticket anyway.
And no notification if you're voting by mail.
Yeah.
It's just like, and it's like.
We should go back to go up to the county clerk, stand in line, audibly say what your vote is, or you're standing behind the county clerk and fires you if you don't vote right.
Okay.
That's your own weapon machine,
Next.
Brad.
Yeah.
Anything else on the highway equipment?
Are we gonna see a demonstration now?
Whenever you're ready.
You have,
And you can go through the rest and we'll do that
yeah,
again?
let's,
Yeah,
we only have
that
one
would
more
be my
item on the
suggestion.
agenda, so we'll do that, and then we can all huddle around and watch the machine work.
Some of it's-
Recorder's office presentation, John, you asked for this on the.
Yeah, I did, because we have the problem with notice. I would like, we didn't have on the agenda, but we had on a prior agenda, we were going to write the recorder and ask her to come and visit with us. Did we get any response?
We haven't sent the letter yet.
Okay.
I was waiting for feedback from this group, and again, there has been none, so
Well, maybe.
Michael will put it on my pile and we'll get it out to the
Okay,
recorder.
so,
It's an extended invitation to the recorder. I have no capability, nor does this commission, to compel the recorder.
I understand that, only too well. And, well, let me go back. I asked Michael
Go back
to
too
put
far.
this on the agenda, because I wanted to talk about it. It was, I thought, a very informative presentation. I think Michael may have a copy of it there with him. I see it sort of sitting under his file, the top of his file. Those of you who didn't attend those two sessions that were broadly advertised, missed a good presentation. I would like for this group, all of us, to see it, have the ability to talk to the recorder about it, if we could. And I'd like to, and she said very graciously at that meeting, I think Barbara heard her, anybody who wants to, as a group, they'd like for me to come present this, I'll come present it. I would think it would be very appropriate for her to come present this to this group and any of the election staff that want to come, and so on and so forth. Anybody else you may feel you want to invite for that meeting. And we just have that meeting, the subject that would be on that agenda, be that meeting only.
How many people in this group actually went to one of the two sessions?
I went to one of the earlier ones.
I think it does raise an issue to the more general information request of the recorder. If we were to actually extend an invitation for that presentation with the understanding that we're only going to talk about that and related issues, it might kill two birds with one stone. I'm just suggesting, but I think because of the knowledge base this commission has as opposed to what those presentations were out there, more detailed, specific questions would come of the Q&A based on that presentation I saw, that I don't know if she would be willing, or Chris Rhodes would be willing to be more forthcoming in answering some of those questions without having them ahead of time. But the way that presentation rolled out, until you actually hear some of the information and how they're relating it to other things, you kind of don't know what questions you're going to be asking ahead of time. So just throwing it out there.
I will extend the invitation. Again, the caveat that she did throw in was I'd like to do it in larger groups so that I get the biggest bang for my buck doing time, or because of the time involved in her doing it. I know of at least one other opportunity where she's doing the presentations. She is willing. I'll extend the invitation. We'll see what she says.
So do we need to make a motion to do this as a group? Make a motion to extend the invitation to her so she knows it comes from all of us, or do we just leave it like it is?
If you want to make a motion, that's fine. I'll entertain it.
Is there a letter already from all of us?
There is a letter. We could just specifically, since she's made the presentation and offered to do it in other places, we're addressing, not focus it solely on this, but make this presentation the nexus of the invitation.
So all but two and probably Jeff and Arnie have seen it once.
Jeff was with me when we did it a year ago.
Well, this is totally different.
Yeah, this
This
was
is totally different? Okay.
Absolutely
Yeah.
different.
Look, you might look at what Chris has there, it's quite,
Everybody
that's a
has,
very professional, well done book.
everybody should have an electronic copy, true, Michael?
It was sent out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll dig in my folder and print it out.
it's a PDF rather than a PowerPoint, but you do have an electronic copy.
Okay.
It's better in color, I might add, if that's capable.
And the
So-
presentation she does provide, actually, she uses actual real-world examples of what the ballot actually looks like. She can't do that for this version because it's public. It has personal information about the person's vote, et cetera.
Yeah, when Jeff and I mean, she used me, you know, she dug up my data while I was standing there watching her do it and used me as an example.
Yeah, and this is nothing like that, this is a canned presentation.
Yeah,
But there is data on it that's been redacted in the information that goes.
Actually, thinking about it, some of the stuff she provided, if she were able to give clear, because of the knowledge base of this group, seeing that kind of information and more examples of it might be helpful to the overall conversation. I'm just, you know, trying to remember everything that she had on the screen versus what was in the.
There's an awful lot more.
But I'm wondering if she couldn't beef some of that stuff up, because some of those examples go directly to conversations we've had on this commission going back in my complete tenure here, so.
So do we want to make a motion, guys, or do we? I'll make a motion if we, as a board, we support inviting or make this presentation.
So motion on the table, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Any objection?
I just don't think it's necessary, but if you want to, have any objection.
Hearing one objection, the motion carries. Okay, future agenda items. However you want to craft what you want to craft to put on the agenda, John,
I will craft something and
get it to Michael,
get it to Michael.
okay?
And I would, I'll be probably proposing that we, because of time, that we, I'll try and break the subjects down and we can do it in more than one set of notions.
Anybody have anything else that they'd like to see as a future agenda item?
I have one other item I'd like on the next, until we get through with this, I'd like to see the flow chart, just an update on where we're at. I don't want to lose it.
You'll see it in April.
Hey,
Anything else? Next meeting dates, March 15th, April 19th, May 17th, was a problem for anybody? Hearing none.
Let's see, March 19th.
March 15th.
March 15th,
No, that's the problem.
it's exactly 4 weeks from today.
And then we may have to schedule an extra meeting. if
Yeah,
it's-
we will either schedule a meeting or move a meeting depending on the request of the Secretary of State, and I'll work with you on that if that becomes necessary.
You've got to make a request, I cannot. I'm the coordinator. That's, I don't make requests.
So, but you're the one that asks for the room.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's no problem scheduling, just let me know what
Yeah,
works.
it's not a problem scheduling until it's a problem scheduling.
I'll work with whatever Joey's got.
Okay. All right, anything else?
move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn with the caveat that we're gonna see a demonstration of the audio equipment.
Second.
Meeting stands adjourned.
David, you're on.